There is no hood like parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our mom sense and dad sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton.
It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast where we take a deep dive into parenting, career, and living your purpose, your dharma. I'm your host, Kanika Chadda Gupta, and today we're talking about something that resonates with every ambitious parent: how to navigate the demands of a high-powered career with the deeply personal role of raising mindful and resilient children. Joining me today is Sunaina Sinha Haldea. Sunana is the global head of private equity capital advisory at Raymond James. She founded her own Sabile Capital, a private equity advisory firm that was acquired by Raymond James in 2021. Under her leadership, the firm has become a leading advisory to private funds and investors globally, completing over 200 fundraising and secondary transactions. She's been recognized as 50 most influential people in private equity by Dow Jones, and is among the 20 trailblazing women in private equity. She's also a board member on many boards and is a guest lecturer at Stanford University. She holds degrees from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard. And so, as you can see, she's a leader in the world of finance, a strategic deal maker, a devoted mother. But what I really want to dig into is how she's mastered the art of staying present and is an advocate for mindfulness and emotional resilience. So we're going to hear such incredible insights from Sunana today. Sunana, welcome to the show.
Kanika, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. Okay, I want to take it all the way back because as I was doing my due diligence, I discovered how you are truly a citoyen du monde, a citizen of the world, having lived all over because your father was at the World Bank. So tell us about your cosmopolitan childhood.
Yes, it was very nomadic. And I am so grateful for it today as I think about all the lessons that it brought to me. My dad worked in the diplomatic service at the World Bank. And so every few years we would move to a new country. So I grew up in sub-Saharan Africa, in Nigeria and Zimbabwe, and then went to Hanoi, Vietnam for the last 2 years of my high school. Was born in India, but never grew up in India after the age of 8, grew up in all of these other places. Ended up, of course, in the US for undergrad and master's and worked in between, and the rest is history. Now a British citizen living here in London. So when I think back to my childhood, Kanika, it gave me a sense of resilience and renewal that I think was such a blessing then. And I keep trying to find how to integrate that into my children's lives now that I am more grounded and living in London. When you have to adapt with the speed and instinctive resilience of a 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old in different environments, make new friends, ingratiate yourself into new cultures, it gives you a muscle for adaptation like no other. And how do you then translate that to this modern world that we live in? I try to keep finding ways for my 3 kids and even for myself these days to put myself in a slightly uncomfortable situation. Because in that moment of discomfort comes innovation, right? It's, as they say, necessity is the mother of all invention. But having that slight discomfort or newness around you makes you sit up straight, makes you more alert, makes you more adaptable to the environment around you. And it's a huge lesson that I learned. And now I joke that as a third culture kid, as folks like I am called in terms of our childhood, you could drop me anywhere and I'll find a moment of connection with another human being, whether it's
Wow.
in a random state of the United States or of India or somewhere else altogether that I find myself. It's finding that human commonality with the person next to you, that a sparkle in their eye, that joke that you can share, that binds us together. And that's been a beautiful life lesson from that childhood.
I love that. I love that. And I'm assuming you speak many different languages. Is there a phrase that you can say that's in Vietnamese or, Hindi?
Absolutely. So I used to speak a lot more than I do today. So given my childhood, there was a point in time where I had, six or more of them in at least a proficient speaking standard under my belt. But languages are such that if you don't use them, you'll lose them. And so I've
Right.
lost quite a few over the years. But I have always I've come up with many, many sayings that I've picked up along the ways. And one of my favorite that I'll translate for you is actually a Shona saying from Zimbabwe that translates to every time a coconut, right? That no matter which tree a coconut drops from, the seed of the tree is the same, and that if you cannot change the way nature presents itself, you should not expect the coconut to fall and expect something else other than a coconut. And I find that to be a great reminder that there is a divine force that runs through us all, that where there is nature involved. But of course, what you can't control is whether the coconut falls at all, whether you pick it off the tree, how far it falls from the tree, etc. So there's things you can control for, and there's things you cannot, and it's a beautiful Shona sting.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. And as you were traveling in your youth, you even had to travel to Bangkok to take the SATs while living in Hanoi and knew you wanted to come back to the States. So, what led your heart back here?
Well, it was very clear to me growing up all over the world that I wanted a liberal arts education. I wasn't one of these children who grew up saying I absolutely had to study this or be that. I was very curious about the world around me and incredibly creative about what the possibilities could be. So I wanted to go and get an educational paradigm that had innovation and creativity and a breadth of thinking built into it, which
Mhm.
almost automatically pointed to the US liberal arts education system. My parents, not having experienced the US education system and living abroad, didn't really know what that was like. So they had me keep my options open. They had me apply for UK universities and Indian universities, just because the unknown is scary, the known is a little bit more familiar. But when it came down to the choices I had, I was able to very clearly articulate to them why the US. And then, of course, when several different of the top universities started offering me a place, most notably Stanford, then they said, okay, all right, if you have the ability to attend a Stanford, we cannot stop you from that journey. That is a once in a
Yes.
lifetime journey. And it very much was. So I'm very grateful for their support for that. It was a daunting task because, as you say, my dad had to fly me to Bangkok for SATs. He had to fly me back to Bangkok for interviews. We're now talking about, I'm going to date myself here. We're talking about the 90s where the
Mhm.
internet had just come to many of our homes, but applications to colleges were still very much snail mail. And one of my
Right.
applications got lost to one of the top universities, just got delivered to the wrong department. These
Oh,
things used to happen back then.
yeah,
So it
I
was such a
remember.
toss up as to what would come out of this college application process. But luckily, what is meant to be will always find you as long as you're doing all the right things. And it did. And Stanford is where my US journey started.
That's amazing. I love that, and I completely agree with that. So you've just built such an impressive career. Can you share how your journey started, from biotech to finance?
Yes. In the early years, back to, I don't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I had to try a few different things to find my path. And it was that curiosity that led me to the Mayfield Fellows Program, at Stanford, which places students in an entrepreneurship deep immersion 9 month intensive course and places them in internships that often convert into full time jobs. So, my first couple of full time jobs, I was graduating just at the dot com bubble had burst. My first couple of jobs came from that network. I was placed into this internship that led me to this network of this gentleman named Alex Afroni, who's considered one of the grandfathers of the biotech world, especially back then. So I worked for a couple of his companies. Now, what is the key life lesson that I have taken away that I keep trying to tell young people? I'm not sure they listen to me these days, but I keep reinforcing it. It's better to be a big fish in a small pond than vice versa. I worked at these two small, mid sized biotech companies, but because I was going in through this internship, I was known by the very C suite executives at both these companies. At the first one, Maxigen, I worked for the president of the company, helping him with M&A at the age of 22, which was an incredibly privileged position to be in and to help him with board decks and board materials and sit in on strategic conversations. And
Wow.
when I transitioned from that company to the second biotech company, one called Suramed, which is now been sold, I was working for directly for the CEO there and the VP of Business Development. What unique positions to have a bird's eye view. And that is often only possible in smaller settings where you can
Right.
have more impact, you can get more responsibility, when resources are scared and you are capable and you are eager, you learn more, you'll do more. And that's exactly how those experiences unfolded. I'll fast forward here a little bit. I knew I wanted a reset from the biotech industry. I wasn't quite believing the business model is sustainable because of the amount of capital and the amount of time required to bring a drug to market. Um, so I decided to go to business school. And when I applied to business school from these two relatively no name biotech companies, I was a little reticent about what my chances might be. I applied to the big three, as I call them, Stanford, Harvard, and Wharton. Got into
Mhm.
all three. Why? Because
Wow.
I wasn't coming from a big bank or a consulting background, which is what they're typically used to seeing. But what I was coming with was this incredible seat at the C suite table, attending board meetings, helping with all these big strategic questions that these companies were grappling with. And that I was able to show to these MBA schools that, hey, look at what I have seen and done, which
Mm.
made me stand out. So it's a huge piece of advice when I see a young career professional come in. I always reinforce that listen, you rather do more and see more in a smaller setting than go brand chasing and be lost in the numbers.
I think that is brilliant. I love it because, many graduates just kind of follow the tried and tested path and go into consulting with, the firms we all know, and it's hard to differentiate yourself. So when you go off the beaten path, and as you said, are this big fish, you're set up for success. All of those C-suite leaders know exactly who you are, and they're going to let you roll up your sleeves and get involved. That's incredible. I
Indeed, and
love
when
it.
it comes to references, right, the world is
Yes.
a very small place. They have to either write references or they know people. Because mine were coming from a CEO or a president, they
Right.
carried a very different weight than coming from a VP or a staffer at a bank or a consulting firm. And
Yes.
that makes all the difference when you're trying to do something really meaningful that requires a big jump, which the MBA very much did. It's competitive any day of the week, but certainly from coming from my background.
Yes. And now tell us about your entrepreneurial journey, and what was that spark that led you to founding Sabile Capital?
It's such a great question, and I have to take it back to Stanford, where Stanford really showed me that my path was being an entrepreneur and helping entrepreneurs. And that's very much been my life's journey, my professional journey so far. It was at Stanford that I realized that actually building and growing, those were the muscles I wanted to build out in myself. And those were the hacks I needed to learn. So whilst it was great getting the experiences that I'd gotten both in the biotech world and then later working at two hedge funds, it was a matter of when, not if, for me as to when my
Right.
entrepreneurial journey came and found me, and I found it. And I did that very early. I started Sabile Capital, a private equity financial services startup focused on giving advice, superlative advice on raising capital and secondaries liquidity solutions in 2011, which was very prescient of its time in its time. There were only a couple of us, boutiques as we're known, getting started. And certainly none of the others looked like me in terms of a woman of color, a citoyenne du monde, somebody from a
Mhm.
very global background. And of course, quite frankly, very young. I was 30 when I got
My
Sibyl off.
goodness. So
Um,
impressionable, I can't believe it.
Indeed, and I think the lesson here for me that I have taken with me is ask the question, why not me? Not why me? Why not me? And secondly, if give it a try, the lessons will stay with you forever, much more so than the successes. Now, it was really knowing Carol Dweck's work with the growth mindset, which I have read and reread and reread over the years, that was transformative for me in those early years because it was really, really hard. Doing any startup is hard, but doing a startup in financial services with a double click into private equity as a woman, a young woman of color, even harder. I'd compounded my chances of failure several fold just because I was not part of the inner circle. They hadn't
Yes,
seen me for decades. They hadn't dealt with me for decades. I didn't come from a traditional banking consulting background and so on. So the early years were full of failures. And when people ask me, how did Sibyl end up growing and breaking out and being successful and then being acquired by a Fortune 300 Raymond James? My answer is we learned to fail incredibly well and incredibly fast. We'd have
yes,
so many a day that we'd say, okay, what is the lesson here for us? Let's learn it. We'll make other mistakes and learn new lessons, but this one we now have learned it and we'll get this part right. And we
that's
kept
brilliant.
doing that week after week, month after month, until it started working. We just kept trying things, keeping what worked, analyzing the rest, and either leaving it or pivoting it into something new, and coming up with a business model that was of value to clients and was of value, therefore, to us. And that
Mm,
has made all the difference. And that's indeed what I used for the rest of my entrepreneurial endeavors. I ended up becoming first money in and chairman of the board of two other companies, both now sold, one to Nestle, one to another private equity backed strategic. So the growth mindset and the growth hacking skill set that the Sibyl days taught me, I use even now on my board seats. But what does it boil down to? What is this hack? The hack is learn to fail fast and learn to fail really, really well, better than your competition. You'll just pivot your way into something that works in a much more meaningful way.
yes. Oh, I completely agree. I am actually trying to, train our kids to like welcome failure and lean into it because that is how you grow. I had listened to this podcast where Sarah Blakely mentioned how at her dinner table, her dad would always ask her and her siblings, "So, what did you fail at today?" And so we do that now, and it's great. It's something like a rewiring. It's something that they can bounce back and not obsess over. And I think so much of my childhood, I think, was wasted on that,
Yeah.
on what didn't come to be. So that's lovely. And now tell us, what your primary focus is now with Raymond James.
So after the sale of Sibyl, I continue to run the Sibyl business, but it's expanded several fold since the acquisition. Now about 55, 60 people across 7 offices globally, doing a large scale business across the private equity ecosystem, across private equity firms, secondaries firms, and more. And so continuing to grow and manage the business on a global basis is part of my day to day here. It's been quite a journey for going from starting something from scratch, just me, myself, and I in my spare bedroom, to a successful scaled up growth business that then got acquired, to now building within a Fortune 300 and navigating what that growth might look like. That's been a new learning curve for me, one that I very much enjoyed. I have to say that if I had to summarize my experience at Raymond James, in one word, it would be culture. It's one of the things I diligenced the most when I thought about selling the business to them. We were an entrepreneurial business built by a woman, with more than 60% of my workforce being women and minorities. We didn't look like anything in Wall Street ever looked like, right? I'm
Right.
not sure any of the business looks like us, even to this day. I would love to be corrected on that. So for me, that element of culture was paramount. And it turns out that I found in Raymond James an organization for whom that culture is equally paramount.
Mm.
The number of sharp elbows here we can count. They stick out because they're sharp elbowed. It is an anomaly, not the norm. And it's been actually most acquisitions end up being not very successful for the acquirer. But and mostly when you look at the research, it comes down to culture issues, that the integration didn't work, or didn't work as well as it could have or should have. Very much here to tell you, 4.5 years after the sale of Sibyl, the Raymond James culture has been a great fit for our team and certainly for me.
Wow. Wow. I love that. That's just really great working knowledge for those who are in corporate, and are treading their own path as entrepreneurs. If it within the culture, it's not just checking a DEI box; it's how you are.
I'll add to that, Kanika, by saying that there are many brands out there, and there's many people who will give you different offers. If you're running a startup and you're doing a financing round, you might get a few different term sheets. If you're looking for a new job, you might get a few different offers. That knowing where your values lie going into the process is incredibly important. Otherwise,
Hmm.
the glitter that gets sparkled in your eyes through numbers or brands can sway you. And so, knowing what those three or four things are as you go into these processes, whether it's professionally, on an individual basis, or for a business, is the key determinant, because at the end of the day, you end up working with people, right? The dollar signs, they show up in your bank account, but they cannot make you happy. Neither can some big brand. It very much is people to people, and you've got to make sure that that checks out.
Yes, yes, 100%. And in this role, you're working in high stakes and it's intense. What are some of the hacks or systems you've created to be able to deal with that and in turn inspire your team to do the same?
Absolutely. I'll talk about myself individually, and then I'll talk about some of the team hacks that I've created to help us keep our North Star in terms of our cultural bearings. In terms of myself, I've tried to embody my leadership, whether it's running my team here at Raymond James or whether it's sitting on the board, or chairing a board. It's very much been about empathetic leadership. And the tenet of empathetic leadership is to really hear, truly listen to what the other person is saying, to relate to their experience, um, but still make decisions from a place of kindness and firmness. The way I describe it is the spectrum of kindness and assertiveness. Some people are really, really assertive. Yeah, some
Right.
can be very jerk-like when they have to lay down the law,
Bullish. Yes.
and then
Yeah.
the others are too wishy-washy, a lot of kumbaya, not
Yeah.
enough assertiveness.
Right.
My whole ethos is you can be both. You can be
Yeah.
kindly assertive and not assertively kind, and ensure that you still have to make. I've had to fire people. I've had to
Yeah.
make tough org decisions, strategic choices, say no, but to be able to do that from a place of kindness, but still empathize with where the other person is coming from. That's
Right.
been a core part of my ethos, and part of that is, I'm sure we'll get into it in a second, is making sure that I have a centering practice that I lean into on a daily basis, and I do. For me, it's meditation, but of course, I can't impose that on others. But what I can impose on my teams is the ability to lead by example.
Mm.
So, part of my empathetic leadership tenet is gratitude. So, every single team meeting on a Monday begins with words of appreciation, open forum for my global team to share with each other. Some days we'll get two or three, some days we'll get more, some days it'll be a bit quieter, but I'll share, say, listen, I'd like to really appreciate so and so for doing X, Y, and Z in the past week. People will appreciate colleagues or juniors. And it sets the tone for the rest of the week that we start with gratitude, right? Whether they have their own individual gratitude practices or not, I don't know.
Yes,
But
that's
because they're working on my
excellent.
team, that is how every Monday morning starts. Um, and then, of course, is lessons learned. Back to Carol Dweck, back to the growth mindset. It's very
Mm,
easy to say it, but if you don't, just like anything else in life, Kanika, I'll tell you, all your listeners, it's one thing to hear me say these words, Kanika say the words. It's another thing to practice it. If knowing and doing have a gap associated with it, you're not transforming. You've
right.
got to change the knowing into doing and come up with daily practices that will continue to help evolve you. So for us, part of it is whenever we finish a project, whenever we finish a mandate, whenever we finish anything, we'll get on a call, call a lessons learned call, and we'll share what went well, what didn't go well, what did we learn, what does this mean for our business going forward, and do that
Mm,
openly. No judgment, no blame, nothing. Just what was your experience of this piece of work that we did,
wow.
making sure that that's part of the discipline of the organization. And then I'd say third and final thing that I do with my team is my job is to be an offering of what is possible through an individual journey. So every time our global team gets together each year, I'll do that offering. I've had Enneagram training in some years. I've had conscious leadership training in other years. I this year we're doing deeper gratitude work together. So whatever my offering is, I've got somebody who's a ninja at morning routines coming to speak to them about morning routines. My job is to be the offering. Now, what they take from it, that's up to each of them.
Right.
But they will always find in me someone who's willing to offer different modalities and different experts.
Wow. 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 That's amazing. And these are all practical takeaways we can just use in our team building, whatever that might be, smaller team or global teams.
Absolutely.
That's great. Now let's double click into your practice because I think this is essential for your own livelihood to set the tone and then how you lead. So tell us how you got into meditation and specifically Vipassana.
Yes, life is what happens to you as you're making plans. And this is back in, 2010, 2011. I was getting ready to launch Sabille, very excited about it. And then within a spate of a couple of years, I had three major losses. Three people close to me passed away in
Oh,
fairly quick succession, um, really sending me into gradually increasing spirals of grief. And the silver lining from that was I really needed something. And I didn't know what that was. I had no spiritual practice of note at the time. I wasn't particularly religious or spiritual. I'd seen it in my home with my parents, but I had nothing that I could hang my hat on. And my boyfriend at the time, now husband, had been through a traumatic event in his own life, much, much younger. And he had done Vipassana meditation and said that it had been transformative for him. And so I asked him, but what was that meditation you said you did? And he gave me the name of Vipassana. And I looked up my first course, booked it, and went, and I've never looked back since. And the kernel, the seed for meditation was sowed in my childhood. My parents took me for one weekend long meditation course. I think I was 11 or 12 at the time. And I never forgot it. I never forgot that I, in that weekend, had the ability to calm my mind in a very profound way. And so I reached back for it when I most needed it, when I was in a very low place in my life, saying, what was that meditation thing again? And lo and behold, there are centers all over the world, including three centers in London and several centers in many of the states in the US and beyond. And I went to my first course. I describe it as boot camp for meditation. It was a incredible experience. Uh, them teaching me hour by hour how to meditate, and I came back out of that completely evolved and changed, and knowing that this was going to be my chosen tool, and meditation is a tool for centering and recentering no matter what life threw at me. Now, I have to
mm,
say, Kanika, in the early years, I would go for my 10-day course, and Vipassana introductory courses are 10 days. And I would try to meditate daily, but it would come and go. I didn't really
Yeah.
have a meditation practice, but I knew the tool was there whenever I needed it. It took a couple of years for me to start building that practice out. I started with 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the morning, and started increasing it gradually. Now, I'd say 14, 15 years later, I meditate for at least an hour every day. I get up at 5:30 a.m., and I'll get my hour in before my three kids wake up. And it is my one and only superpower. I often smile when people ask, "Hey, how do you do all of this? How do you travel the world, manage a business, three kids, boards, this, that, media presence, etc.?" And my answer is always the same: the ability to recenter, rebalance, and go again. And that's what meditation has brought to me. I think I will liken it as, we go to the gym to build our muscles in the biceps and the triceps and the glutes and to stay strong physically. We brush our teeth to clean our teeth. We take a shower to clean the body. What is it that we do to protect the mind, to grow the
Yes.
mind's ability to bounce back from setbacks, failure, to build its resilience? The answer is most of us do very little. We often look at the mind when things break, when the mind has gone into a low place and you're having feelings that you cannot resolve. So then, whether it's anxiety or sadness, depression, or other things, you're now looking at a therapeutic modality for mental health. One of my huge missions in life is to talk to people about preventative mental health techniques. Meditation is one of them. It's not the only one. It's my one, though, because I've seen it absolutely transform my life, transform my relationships, transform my career, and it remains one of my superpowers daily.
Wow. I'm really taking this as a sign because you are the second guest that I've had on the podcast that has mentioned Vipassana specifically. Diego Perez, he goes by the moniker Young Pueblo on Instagram. He's another one, and talked about this immersive course and how it was started by SN Guenca. And so, yeah, I'm completely intrigued, and I want to speak for my audience members because it's not like we haven't heard that like the most successful people in the world all meditate, but we have just a smorgasbord to choose from. There's transcendental, there's, I
Yes.
had taken an art of living course and have not done Sudarshan Kriya every day, and so how do you, stick to this practice? And what I find so intriguing about it, I want to just share is that it's not guided. There's nothing that you have to like listen to or specifically do with the breath. You are just still. You're just still. And to sit in silence for 60 minutes with nothing or nothing else that you're focusing on but your breath and your thoughts that are coming and going. Like, how do you create the discipline to do that and stick to it, that I'm going to do this today and tomorrow and day after, no matter what city I'm in and what is going on, in my world at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, firstly, don't let the 60 minutes scare you or any of the listeners. I remember I've been doing this now nearly for 15 years. So, my first piece of advice is just get started. Go to your first Vipassana course and let them teach you. It is very much a skill to be learned. And most people will say to me, "Hey, but I've never done anything like this before. I don't know how to meditate." Even better, they prefer if you don't have any meditation background, because so then they can teach you the meditation technique from scratch so that there's no unwinding of other techniques to be done.
Right. Okay.
I started, as I mentioned, it took me a couple of years to start building a daily practice, but I would still go in those first few years. I'd still go for my course every year. It was transformative each time I would go. It would take me deeper into the practice.
I have a
And
question
finally,
there. Sorry.
yeah,
Is the course, are you doing a Maun Vrat where it's a silence meditation? So you're
yes, it is
silent the
science.
entire time.
You silent from day one to day 10, and there's a science behind that. The science is, um, if you to completely stop the external incoming stimuli, right? So, no devices, nobody talking to you, you can then start listening to what is inside.
Wow.
People say to me, "How are you silent?" I'm the chattiest person. Kanika, how long do you have? We've been doing this
Me
for another
too.
3 hours.
Yes.
But the noisiest place on this earth is your own mind.
Mm.
The number of people that say to me, I wake up at 2 a.m. and I can't fall back asleep because my mind is just gone.
Yeah.
It's that ability to still that mind, bring it back inside you, for you to control your mind and have mastery over it is the biggest superpower you can ever learn.
Mm.
And I think that has been the transformation of meditation in my life is mastery over my mind. I get to decide if I'm angry or sad for how long and with what intensity. My mind is not running me, I'm running my mind,
Yes.
right? So the way I describe it is if something happens and I would have been angry or sad about it for 4 hours, and now because I've started meditating even a little bit, it's 3 hours, 45 minutes. That's 15 minutes of freedom. Wow, that's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
as you meditate, 15 will become 20, will become 25, and now you're not angry or sad nearly as strongly. The intensity will come down, and
Right.
the hours of liberation will go higher, and higher will just increase.
Yes.
And it's no different from, weight training or learning to run a marathon. You start
Mm.
small. Like I said, my daily practice started with, I think, 5 or 10 minutes initially, and then I kept adding to it. And now I can do the 60 easily. And I can do but in the courses even more than that. But the point is, it's the training of the mind over a long period of time that got me there. So don't let
Yeah.
60 scare you. Just get started.
Just start. Yes. And how are you passing, this practice on to your kids? And what's that ripe age that they're going to be like, yes, I can sit still and hone in on this?
Vipassana tradition of SN Goenka has wonderful children's courses. So I'm doing to my kids what my parents did to me that weekend when I was 11 or 12 years old. Once a year, I've told the kids it's a non-negotiable in our family life. And my husband, having done Vipassana himself, fully believes that all we can do as parents is sow the seeds in our kids. When the seed blooms, it grows, whether it grows, that's not in our control. But
Right.
if the seed is planted, then at least they know that by watering it a little bit, it can grow in their adult lives. So once a year, I take my two, right now, my two older children, because the course is charged for 8-year-olds and over. And my kids have gone now for several years. My little guy is only 6, so I've got to wait a couple more years before I take him to his first course. And it's a lovely weekend. It's obviously not 10 days for the kids, and it's not
Yeah.
silent for the kids, and they do
Okay.
it beautifully. It's weekend long. It'll be short bursts of meditation, 10 to 25 minutes long each session, and then games, and they'll do pottery, and they'll do arts and crafts, and they'll go for a forest walk, and they'll come in and do a short burst of meditation, and they'll go out again, and they teach the kids how to meditate. They teach the kids a very accessible form of meditation that children can easily learn. And it's funny, I volunteer at these courses quite regularly. And on the
Mm.
Friday evening, when the kids first arrive, they're kind of looking around. They really don't know what to make of this. They're very fidgety. One's picking their nose, one's got the leg in the air.
Right.
Uh, 8 to 11-year-olds, what are you going to expect? By Saturday afternoon, they're sitting like little Buddhas, all 80 of them, or
That's
most of the 80 of them.
beautiful. That's
And it's just the
beautiful.
power of the mind settling and them settling it themselves. Because no one can meditate for you, you have to do it by
Right.
yourself.
Right.
And it's just unbelievable to see them learn it, do it, and the stillness that then comes through to them in that meditation setting is that really is a sight to behold.
Yes. Oh my gosh, sign me up. We will talk about this.
Yeah.
I am
And we have
so
teenager courses as
excited.
well. So my daughter will start
Yes.
doing the teenager courses next year and so forth. But they do it very well for children. And
Yes, 100%. And I think it's the most like incredible life hack. If you have the skill at such a young age, you are really setting yourself up for a life of purpose and success. It's really, really amazing. I love it. I didn't get to touch on this, but I find this so fascinating about you too, is that you are a sommelier. My dad is too, actually, and
very cool.
yes, yeah, and I mean he has such a penchant for wine and studied in Paris. My bua and cousin both live in Paris, and so he was there in his 20s, and I feel like just the Parisian culture is just kind of embedded in him throughout. But yeah, I love it, and I think it's amazing how you got into this outside of all the other things that the plates that you're spinning in life. So, how did you decide to just take on this study of wine?
Again, life it comes in the way of the best made plans. I really needed a place to stay in my junior year at Stanford. And there was one of the best residential places at the time at Stanford was the French House.
Okay.
And I decided to become somebody who sort of helps manage that house as a way to get housing for that year. And I was required to teach a course on behalf of the French department, something to do with French culture. I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? I said, well, you know what? I've always wanted to learn about wine. And France is one of the largest wine exporters in the world. Let's try to bring these things together. So I started the Stanford wine class, all going back now to like year 2001. And it ended up
That's awesome.
becoming Stanford's most popular course.
Uh-huh.
Voted for several years, ran for 3.5 years. Even after I graduated, I would go teach it. And because
Mm,
Stanford is so well located near Napa and Sonoma,
Sonoma,
I got all these
yes.
wine experts from and winemakers and CEOs of wineries to come in from Napa Sonoma and come and talk to the students and do wine tastings. And that's how I started developing my palate and my nose and my knowledge, quite frankly, about wine. And when I went to Harvard Business School for my MBA, taught a seminar there at Harvard College too, and then moved to London to work at a hedge fund and said, well, I'm going to lose all this wine knowledge. So before I lose it, why not do the Court of Master Sommeliers wine test and see if I can qualify? Ended up being a really intense because I don't know
I
what I was signing up for.
know.
And I landed up
I
there going, oh my OMG, this is
Yes.
very intense because I was with
Yes.
all these sommeliers who worked in the trade, and there was a lot that it turns out that I did not know I needed to learn on the
Right.
spot to get to pass the test, but lo and behold I did. And so now I use the qualification for fun purposes with friends, for charities, for things like that.
Yes. Oh, it's really, really amazing. I mean, I just think it's awesome how you can take a whiff and be like, this is a Chardonnay from this region of France, circa, 2004. Like it's like how can you know that? It's really like
It's
just the
it's a
coolest
real
thing.
skill, and I have to say that I certainly don't drink as much anymore. Three kids,
Yeah.
travel, hectic life, and of course, just meditation values and so on and so forth has made me a lot mellower person. So I don't have the palate and nose that I once did, but I certainly still love, as you say, the detective nature of being a wine
Yes.
sommelier. To be able to have a sip of something and be like, "Oh, this is really intriguing for these reasons," is fascinating.
Yes, so cool, so cool. And you've mentioned how you're always on a plane, and surely you have some travel tips. Maybe there's products or gadgets you swear by, or something that
Yes.
you do to like reset because especially for those busy entrepreneurs that are traveling. Like, what have you learned?
It's so important because I'm always looking for good travel hacks. So if
Yeah,
anybody has any, I'm always ears. The two that I found, there's not all the usual things. I'm not going to go through the usual things that we all know about in terms of, getting sleep and resetting your clock. There's plenty of research
yeah,
out there. But
yeah.
two that I think may be more unique for your listeners that certainly I found over the last 5 years of doing a lot of long haul travel is compression socks, right? It has been
Mm,
a game changer in my. If I am flying for more than 3 hours, I have compression socks on. Why? Because often a lot of the fatigue that you feel that's associated with quote unquote jet lag after you land is water accumulation in your extremities that the body's trying to clear. And that often
oh
takes
wow,
2, 3 days to do so. And having the compression socks has been incredibly helpful to make sure that that doesn't happen. That's one. The
right.
second thing is electrolytes, right? Again, there is dehydration. No matter how much water you drink, your body just does lose salts when you're traveling in the air
Right.
for several hours. And it takes the body generally 2 to 3 days to replenish those salts. And so being able to give it that boost straight after you land and for a couple of days afterwards just helps you reset faster and gives you the energy much more effectively than coffee or tea can. So
Yes.
I'd say compression socks and hydration tablets, they are always with me when I'm traveling. In addition to, of course, noise canceling earbuds, not AirPods, ladies and gentlemen, not
Mm-hmm.
AirPods, because those are really uncomfortable to sleep with. And then you'll hear
Right.
messages coming through from your iPhone.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm talking about noise canceling earbuds that you can buy, not the yellow squishy ones, proper ones on Amazon for
Mhm.
$10, $12.
Yep.
And that just dulls off enough noise that you can just fall back asleep without somebody coughing or sneezing next to you waking you up.
Oh my gosh, this is great. Now we're gonna go
Those are my
shopping.
three.
Yes. And lastly, your mom sense moment. And by that I mean a time that you can pinpoint where you trusted that intuition of yours. And you don't have to be a parent to have this. It's just the fun show name. But I feel like we all have an inner knowing, and it's so important that we hone in and listen to that voice. So, a moment that you can share with us where it was like, I trusted my mom's sense and it steered me on the right path.
Absolutely. So, a few years ago, we started having these very extreme idiopathic allergic reactions with our daughter.
Okay.
Idiopathic is a medical way of saying no known cause. She's been tested for all the allergies in every way, shape, or form repeatedly. Nothing identified. Yet the body is going through this major allergic reaction. And there were a whole host of medical interventions that the doctors put her on that were quite extreme, that will be causing some very tough side effects for her. And my mom since said that actually I needed what my one job and mission was to figure out a different treatment protocol that took her away from the smorgasbord of prescriptions, steroids, and liquid steroids, and all sorts of other immunosuppressants that she was on to dampen the inflammation. And my mom sense was right, and I was able to find a different way to treat medical way. By the way, I'm not talking about naturopathy or anything like that, because sometimes you have medical issues that need medical interventions.
Yes. Yes.
um,
Absolutely.
but to find, listen, what was the standard of care that would avoid her being on such strong steroids, because steroids do have major side effects for kids,
Right.
for their growth, for their behavior, and so on and so forth. And I didn't like what I was seeing in terms of how her body reacted to them. And so it was incredibly important for me to find an alternative medical path, medically tried and tested path for her. And that came purely from mom sense, because if I just followed the literature and followed the advice of the doctors, that she'd still be on that now.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that I did.
That is excellent. I love that. And it's funny how, you do have to trust what this voice is telling you. So no one in a lab coat or an expert can really tell you how to handle sometimes health issues at hand. You just know there's a better way.
Absolutely.
That's so great. And is there a mantra that you live by?
Be the change you wish to see.
Mm, Gandhi Ji.
It's attributed to Gandhi, but it's something that I use all the time in my workplace and with my kids. It's so easy to point the finger and say, if only my spouse would change, life would be so great. If only my
My
kids would do
sibling,
this.
yeah.
Yeah, my siblings and you, and right. How many issues walk into my office saying, well, he and she and this, that, the other. Well, okay, what are you gonna do about it? You
Mm,
change yourself. And you want more gratitude and you want somebody to show you more gratitude, you give out more gratitude first and then see it come back. You be the change you wish to see. Right.
oof,
I used it in my business and I was like, there's not enough diversity in finance. Okay, well, I need to be the change I wish to see. If I don't build diversely and inclusively, how can I look at someone else and say, hey, you can do it too? So
yeah.
I had to do it first. It's the most powerful call to changing ourselves first before we can ask or expect anything else to change around us.
Oh, this was so wonderful, Sunana. Thank you so much for all of your advice and wisdom. It was truly an enlightening chat, and I'm just so honored to have had you on the show.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful, deep conversation on one of my favorite topics, which is, of course, mindfulness and bringing that into young people and our own lives. So thank you for having me, Kanika.
Thanks for listening to this episode of That's Total Mom Sense. You can listen to the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for That's Total Mom Sense. You can learn more about my guests by logging on to www.thatstotalmomsense.com. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active on social media. My handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta. And if you have ideas for show topics or guests you can't wait to have on the show, write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. And lastly, please rate, review, and subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense if you haven't already. Thanks for being in my tribe.